Well, it may be a comfort or it may not be a comfort for you to know that I bring greetings from the other side of the river, Lambeth, long way away. You're North, I'm South. You're Tory, I'm Labour. And exactly the same thing is happening to me. I'm knocking myself out at the moment, fighting a plan which is just as stupid as Barnett's, perpetrated by people who are just as ignorant of how libraries work or what they are for. Just as unwilling to actually explain to the residents what they really mean by these great sounding plans, just as waffly in their replies, just as this, just as that. I could stand behind you and speak through you everything you said. It's going on. I don't actually think it should make us feel any better because it's such a consistent pattern. The main thing being is that, as Barbara says, you speak to anybody in the street about libraries and you immediately get this spiel, which actually I find rather irritating in the end because I'm always terribly busy rushing around. And so to have somebody standing there, but it's really good for the children and people use the IT, and I'm standing there saying, yeah, I know that. Tell it to them, not me, you know. So everybody knows what libraries are all about, I think. Is there by any chance anybody in this room who does think libraries are a waste of time and we don't need them? Because it would be great to have a debate. But that's not going to happen. Okay.
Really?
Well, I'm just doing that to cloud that a little bit.
Well, if you'd like to chip in at this point.
No, carry on.
I'm really curious. You're the first person I've met who is even not, who has any sort of
I'm being a devil's advocate.
I know, but you say that, but seriously, I'm asking you seriously why.
Some of what Adam said, I thought was quite thoughtful about the changing nature of the role. So the question is what is, not so much do you need them at all, but what are they and what are they for? Because you have big buildings to house all these books physically. So if that's not what it's, if books aren't what libraries are for, then where should they be and what are they for?
Libraries are always.
I'm not quite trying to quote you, but I'm just saying.
The libraries. I mean, the wealth of books that we have is a relatively recent phenomenon. Look at the size of the great libraries of Bath. They were great big buildings with places and places to study and debate. You know, this is what they. You know, I would argue that they're going back to. Is what I would say. So yeah, you do still need a room because actually, what takes up most of the room in the libraries is the people using them.
I've noticed recently there's a queue every morning. The National Library opens at 10, and every time I've gone by there before it's open, there is a queue going around the building of people waiting to get in to do their studying and during exam time.
Isn't that kind of
cut it to 540 square foot?
Sure, no, I'm not here to argue with the council. What I'm saying is that isn't that the case that there are these big buildings, and so now people have found a use that maybe isn't the core reason for them being there, to be an alternative place like a Middlesex University. There's a great big campus next door, and then the students find themselves taking up stories in Hendon Library and using it for study. Well, why doesn't university provide maybe
Wouldn't it be wonderful if that's what you're hearing is going to happen to the buildings and they're going to evolve and develop and become hubs of the community that can be used by all?
That's great, but the question is
we're hearing they're just going to close and
no, but that's not. I'm not advocating that. What I'm saying is that just because Hendon Library has 2 stories they can't quite work out what to do with right now, filling them up with as an overflow for the university, which is very well resourced and has plenty of money, as a public service, stops the public from using those rooms in a public way because it now becomes private overflow space, effectively for the university. And is that what the community thinks is the best use for a library?
There's people's fears about the plans for Hendon Library. If you look at the plans for Hendon Library, there is that fear that that's what the educational establishment that they're referring to. Now, I'm going to be really careful.
Yes.
I've got to be really careful. I don't know. But my actually, at Middlesex University, well, Middlesex University is an open campus. So, at the risk of being on the other side, Middlesex University is an open campus. Anyone can join the gym, anyone can use the Shepherd Library. So if you're talking about a partnership, then actually maybe that's not necessarily one of the worst ones. But I don't know. I don't think that I wouldn't know if that's what they're interested in, and have Barnet Council done one of their other. Oh, that's fine. We'll just get the university to take it because they want all the other buildings. And is that really the educational establishment that they're talking about? That's what everybody reads between the lines.
But the interesting thing is
is that what's happening?
This didn't come up on the survey, it wasn't in the questionnaires, it wasn't in the consultations. And when the opposition party asked for a task force, a working group, a subcommittee, to ask people what they wanted, just the way you're saying, Dan, what do you think the library should be used for now? How should we improve them and bring them up to date? Get the information rather than presenting them with you have a choice of 3 things. The council said, no, we don't want to ask people what they want.
Against some of the views that the opposition party had last year, we've got to return. That committee that you spoke about is not a committee that just sits and navel gazes. That's the committee that runs the library service. It's fully in control. It's not a cabinet member for the libraries. It's meant to be them who's doing it. And I have to say,
so
across the board, with all the councils in that committee, I've not been blown away by the level of debate. I mean, you come along and you make detailed points, but I suspect your points that you make, I know because I've sat there, are not picked up by any of the councillors across the parties, and they don't pursue the officers in the detail.
You must have been absent from the meeting where I tried twice, 2 meetings, 2 months in a row, to get that committee to allow there to be a subcommittee to ask the people what they wanted rather than telling them what was on offer.
They don't just have a new bureaucracy. That committee can do it itself.
But you can't do it if you don't have the permission to do it. And the chair said, no, we don't want to have a subcommittee. No, we don't want to ask the people what they want.
Try to labour the point. But as that committee itself, in its session as a whole, I think there was a meeting, I didn't go, I had other things that I had to be at, but there was one meeting where the libraries weren't even discussed. There was nothing on the agenda, I think, about libraries.
That's because it's the children education libraries where they have to do other things.
But I'm saying that I'm not blown away by any of the councillors on that committee, as that they've got a grip of the whole thing. They could be doing a lot more. I'll just come back on your point on that.
No,
I think you
it's completely fallacious. Because you cannot do anything.
Doing what they need to be doing, and who is it up to the public to pressure their councillors to be able to do
this? I mean, they're very quick to go and stand, and I'm not knocking, stand on a line and wave a banner, but they're in control of this committee. And
no, they're not, Dan.
No, the councillors are sorry.
The Tory party councillors are in control.
Yeah,
they have the majority on that committee. They can veto, and they do every single motion put by the Labour Party members.
And how many of those have you seen?
How many?
Yes.
I go to every meeting.
No, how many meetings? How many motions, or how many how many interventions that make the Conservative council sit really uncomfortably in their seats have you seen?
Well, I'd say the council meeting with the mayor. I'd say with the council meeting with the mayor voted both ways, and the only reason that he knew that he voted wrong was because he got it wrong was because it got publicly cheered. He knew he was in the wrong because the public were behind it. So I'd say actually, from what I'm not a Labour supporter, I'm not a Labour voter, but I'm. In that meeting, some of the things that the Labour councillors said about what libraries are for, actually, because I think, like there's this idea that libraries are just, people think there's what they said, and actually Alistair, when he presented his petition, I was really impressed with what he said about what libraries are for. They do get it. I mean, as somebody that's got experience, I think they do get it.
I don't want to drop you on it, but to be fair, I mean, so you just spoke about the situation in Lambeth. Who's looking at Lambeth? Yeah, which is not a Conservative council from my last memory. We've got the situation.
I'm addressing your point about councillors making motions and
you're making
in public debate.
You make the comment about speeches, and I agree with you. Labour councillors can make very, very passionate speeches about how wonderful things should be. But the truth is in neighbouring Harrow, they've just shut 40% of the libraries. Now, they can make as many speeches how terrible it is and how they blame the government and everything else. This reality is...
We're not here praising Labour. I would oppose it there as well. It is regardless of whether, like I said, about Labour or...
The reality is, this is the reality.
Just interrupt and ask...
No, I do feel, could we have...
Yes,
allow all speakers to finish? I may not agree with the gentleman's views. I think it's every right to be heard without constant interruptions. So could people speak through the chair and allow people to finish?
Thank you for that. Could I suggest, and thank you very much, that we ask Holly and Alistair to have their say now, and then we'll by all means we can carry on with questions. And Dan, I welcome your contribution. Well,